In movies, the Wild West is often simplified with sheriffs and gunslingers, but the reality is richer. Beyond the stereotypes, it includes bad whiskey, the perilous Dodge City, and even the chilling tale of the first serial killer family. Join us in this video as we unravel intriguing facts, shedding light on the complexity of life in the frontier. Today, we dive into the dusty streets of Springfield, Missouri, where the very first Quickdraw gunfight unfolded. It was a showdown between the legendary Wild Bill Hickok and Davis Tutt. The stakes were high, and the tension palpable as a dispute over gambling winnings escalated into a deadly confrontation. Hickok and Tutt found themselves entangled in a money dispute, with Tutt attempting to run Hickok out of town. After a poker game, Tutt demanded $40, claiming it was owed from a horse deal. Hickok, being the victor, paid up, but Tutt, unsatisfied, pressed for an additional $25. When Hickok refused, Tutt brazenly snatched Hickok's pocket watch. The following day, Tutt paraded around Springfield with the watch, defying Hickok's attempts to reason. Just before 6 p.m. on July 21, 1865, the two faced off in the town square. Words were exchanged, and as tension peaked, both men drew their guns. In a split second, a bullet pierced Tutt's heart, marking the first recorded quick-draw gunfight in the annals of Wild West history. The Wild West was more than just romanticized tales. It was a gritty reality where disputes often ended in a deadly draw. Now let's move on to another aspect that reshapes our perception of this iconic era. 2. Millions of bison were slaughtered. As we ride deeper into the Wild West, let's explore a tragedy that unfolded on the Great Plains, a massacre not of men, but of millions of majestic bison. In the early 1800s, these creatures roamed freely, but by the early 1900s, their population had plummeted to less than 1,000. What led to this devastating decline? The American buffalo, a vital source of food and hide for Native Americans, faced annihilation. The U.S. Army, driven by a desire to eliminate this resource, commissioned mass slaughters starting in 1830. One chilling directive from a colonel encapsulates the sentiment: kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. Even Buffalo Bill Cody joined the carnage, claiming the lives of 4,000 bison in 2 years. By 1889, only 256 buffalo remained in captivity. Today, their population has recovered, but the scars of this mass slaughter echo through history. The vast herds that once roamed freely became casualties of progress, and the consequences extended far beyond the prairies. Now let's debunk a common misconception about the attire of the quintessential cowboy. Cowboys didn't wear 10-gallon hats. Think of a cowboy, and you likely envision a figure clad in a broad-brimmed 10-gallon hat. But hold your horses, partner. The truth is, cowboys of the Wild West weren't donning those oversized headpieces popularized by Hollywood. In the scorching heat of the Wild West, cowboys opted for practicality over Hollywood glamour. John Stetson's Boss of the Plains was their hat of choice, flat-brimmed, lightweight, waterproof, and durable. These Stetsons, made with nutria fur, offered protection from the elements and even doubled as a makeshift bucket for thirsty horses. Contrary to the iconic imagery, these Stetsons retailed for $4.50, a modest sum even by historical standards. The Dodge City Peace Commission, captured in an 1883 photo, showcases these hats, a far cry from the Hollywood-fueled imagery. The Wild West was a place of practicality and resilience, where cowboys relied on essentials rather than cinematic stereotypes. Now, let's delve into an unexpected facet of life on the frontier. Gun control was stricter back then. When you think of the Old West, the image of every cowboy packing heat might come to mind. However, the reality was quite different in many frontier towns. Gun control wasn't just a modern debate, it was a stringent practice in fledgling Wild West settlements. Towns like Deadwood, Dodge City, Abilene, and Tombstone had laws prohibiting the carrying of guns within town limits. Just like a coat check, visitors had to surrender their firearms to the local sheriff in exchange for a token. Only residents were exempt, allowing them to keep guns in their homes. Contrary to the widespread notion of a lawless paradise, these towns sought order through strict gun control measures, challenging the popularized Wild West narrative. The next time you imagine a saloon filled with armed patrons, remember that in many places, guns were checked at the door. But there's more to unravel about the gritty reality of the Wild West, so let's continue our journey into the annals of history. Deceased outlaws were propped up and photographed. As we mosey along the dusty trails of the Wild West, let's shine a lantern on a peculiar practice that unfolded in the aftermath of epic showdowns and notorious outlaws. Picture this: deceased outlaws propped up and photographed. It wasn't just about justice. It was a spectacle, a macabre display of frontier law enforcement. In a time when newspapers chronicled the exploits of gangs and outlaws, proof of their demise was sought after. Enter the macabre trend of photographing the deceased, sometimes arranging entire gangs together for a chilling snapshot. It served as a stern warning to potential lawbreakers, showcasing the harsh fate that awaited those who dared defy the law. With the advent of photography in the 19th century, these grim tableaus became a grim part of Wild West history, capturing the final moments of infamous outlaws before they were laid to rest. The Wild West wasn't just about gunfights. It was a theater of justice, played out in newspaper prints and somber photographs. But let's shift our focus from the eerie to the daring, the first armed bank robbery that disrupted the peace, not in the Wild West, but in Massachusetts. The first armed bank robbery occurred in Massachusetts. Hold on to your Stetsons, folks. We're riding out of the Wild West momentarily to a small town in Massachusetts, where the first armed bank robbery took place, shaking the foundations of law and order. Meet Edward Green, a 32-year-old postmaster who sought a desperate way out of his debts. It's 1831, and Malden, Massachusetts, witnesses an unprecedented event. Edward Green, in a bid to escape his financial problems, walks into Malden Bank to get change. In a chilling turn of events, he shoots the bank president's 17-year-old son and walks out with $5,000, which is over $105,000 today. Green's crime, driven by desperation, didn't go unnoticed. His sudden wealth raised suspicions, and he confessed to the murder a month later. In 1866, he became the first man hanged for an armed bank robbery in America. The Wild West might have been synonymous with daring heists, but the roots of armed bank robberies trace back to a small town far from the dusty trails of the frontier. Now, let's belly up to the bar and explore the surprising truth about the spirits that flowed in those iconic saloons. The whiskey was terrible. Imagine stepping into a Wild West saloon, ordering the finest whiskey, and then promptly gagging. It's not a Hollywood stunt. It's the reality of the terrible whiskey that flowed in those iconic establishments. Join us as we take a sip of the past. In a time when copyright laws were lax and the frontier lacked oversight, the whiskey business was, let's say, unregulated. Some so-called bourbons were distilled from low-grade molasses, earning nicknames like Coffin Varnish and Tangle Leg. The bottle might claim a decade of aging and a Kentucky origin, but the taste often resembled anything but. Whether mixed with water or other spirits to boost profits, the whiskey of the Wild West era was a far cry from today's refined spirits. It was a potent concoction that might make you question the authenticity of that aged label. The next time you envision a cowboy nursing a glass of whiskey, remember that the reality might have involved a less than palatable concoction. But our journey through the surprising realities of the Wild West isn't over. Let's lasso the next revelation. Cowboy meant criminal. When the term cowboy echoes in our minds, we often think of noble ranchers and rugged individuals. However, in certain parts of the Old West, cowboy carried a darker connotation. In the late 1800s, especially in and around Arizona, cowboy was synonymous with criminality. The San Francisco Examiner boldly declared them as the most reckless class of outlaws. Notorious gangs like the Cowboys, who frequented Tombstone, were infamous for their lawless exploits. Take a look at the Wild Bunch, Butch Cassidy's gang. In a surprising twist, the term cowboy became associated with the most reckless outlaws, challenging the romanticized image we often associate with the frontier. It turns out that not all cowboys rode into the sunset as virtuous heroes. Some were part of notorious gangs that terrorized the Wild West. But the surprises don't end there. Let's ride into the shadowy realm of America's first serial killer family. America's first serial killer family emerged. The Wild West had its share of not just gunslingers and outlaws, but also, believe it or not, serial killers. Meet the Bender family, also known as the Bloody Benders, whose gruesome tale unfolded in Labette County, Kansas. In the early 1870s, the Benders settled in Labette County, operating a seemingly innocuous establishment, a cabin divided into a general store and lodging for travelers. However, beneath the facade lay a sinister truth. The family, comprising John Sr. Elvira, John Jr., and his supposed sister Kate, is believed to have killed at least 11 people. As suspicions grew and authorities closed in, the Benders vanished, leaving behind a gruesome legacy. The Wild West, it seems, had its own brand of horror beyond the gunfights and saloon brawls. The tales of the Wild West weren't confined to showdowns and duels. Sometimes the frontier harbored secrets far more chilling. Now, let's return to the dusty streets, this time to the infamous Dodge City, where violence lurked in the shadows. Dodge City was extremely violent. As we wrap up our journey through the lesser-known facets of the Wild West, let's gallop into the heart of Dodge City, Kansas, the epitome of frontier violence. Forget the romanticized tales. Dodge City had a staggering murder rate that would give even today's most notorious cities a run for their money. Dodge City, often portrayed as the quintessential Wild West town, had an annual recorded murder rate of 0.165 or 165 adults killed per 100,000 people. To put it in perspective, living in Dodge City from 1876 to 1885 meant facing a 1 in 61 chance of being murdered. In contrast, the most violent city in the world in 2020 had a lower murder rate. Dodge City's legacy challenges the myth of the Wild West as a lawless paradise and underscores the harsh realities faced by its inhabitants. While we dust off our boots and bid farewell to the untamed tales of the Wild West, remember that history, much like the frontier, is full of surprises. From the first quick-draw gunfight to the chilling legacy of the Bloody Benders, the Old West was a tapestry woven with threads of both heroism and horror. Until next time, partner, keep your spurs jingling and your hat tilted against the setting sun. Happy trails.